Hi everyone, I'm Hugo from Dreamwaves. Unfortunately, this year we could not attend the CSUN Assistive Technology conference in Anaheim, so I'm going to give you a recording of what presentation we would have given there. We are an early stage startup. We're doing a navigation product for blind and visually impaired people, and we want to help blind people see the world through their ears. This is the outline of the talk, so I'm going to very briefly introduce you to the app and then talk about our implementation and which challenges did we face during our implementation. But very briefly, because we want to focus on this talk, on the user studies we did and how we designed our app to be meaningful for our users. Independent mobility is a big challenge for blind and visually impaired people. So every time someone needs to go somewhere they have never been before on their own, this comes at the cost of a lot of effort and a lot of planning, a lot of energy spent. Especially during our investigations, we identified three different groups of people. So a group of people here shown on the left is almost full independent or full independent. They go everywhere on their own using all types of technology to help them do that. So they use current navigators to plan and help them go about their routes. They use applications to tell them where they are and so on. There's another group who wants to be independent, who tries to do everything on their own, but purposely limit those activities. They say, yeah, I can do that, I would do that, but many times I choose not to because I get too tired. So for instance, if I want to go to the doctor, normally I just take a taxi because I want to keep my energy to talk to the doctor instead of going a full route on my own. I know I would get there too tired. And then there's a third group of people, this is probably the majority. There are people that say, no, I don't need to be independent. I can get help from my kids or from my spouse, and I don't need to use technology, or I don't need to go alone. And this is, in many cases, these people end up staying home most of the time, which leads to social isolation. The people just are more lonely. Yeah. So we have created an app to help people be more independent and go about on their own. So it's an app that runs on a smartphone. Currently, it's only for iOS. So it's a normal app, and you can download it and you can install it, and then you can wear it on your chest like that. You can wear your phone with a lanyard, and basically you can hear the direction where you need to go to. Instead of hearing turn-by-turn instructions, you just hear sounds telling you where you have to go. You can hear that with normal headphones. Any kind of headphones works. We recommend these two types here shown on the photo, the Bose Frames and the Sony In-Ear Duo, because they leave the ears uncovered. And that means that you can hear everything around you and still hear the sounds from the app and be guided. With the app, you can use voice interactions. You can, like with many other apps, you can just simply tell the app where you want to go to. As I said, you have navigation by hearing. I'll just show you on the next slide how that works exactly. And it's made for the outdoor for the time being. And in the future, we will want to offer obstacle detection and warning about where obstacles are. And we use spatial audio to guide people. So how does that work in practice, in reality? So say you want to go to some place, imagine there's a pharmacy right in the end of that street there. You will tell your app, take me to this pharmacy. And like in a normal navigation app, the app will plan a route and then will place virtual waypoints embedded in the real world. So it's augmented reality. So these waypoints are connected with real world locations, in this case, in places where you have to turn. Now, when you tell the app go, then you start hearing with your headphones, but with spatial audio, you hear a sound coming from that location, from that waypoint. So what you can hear is that you can really hear the direction. In the case what we have now, you hear a music, so you would hear music coming from that location. You can easily identify the direction, and then you can turn there and you can walk there. Once you walk there, the sound stops at that point and starts at the next waypoint. So now you hear it, oh, it's coming from my left. In this case, I can hear it from my left side, and then I can just turn and walk there. Again, when you hit that point, the sound stops and starts at the next point. Again, you can hear it and simply walk there. And that's how the navigation works. In the world, there are about 250 million blind or visually impaired people who have these problems, who face these problems every day. 20 million in Europe, almost 8 million in the US, and so on. So there's a lot of people that can benefit from this type of technology. So how do we do it, and which challenges we face? We use GPS for rough positioning, but of course GPS is very far from perfect, as I try to show you here on the picture. So just try to point, this is a small route I did around the block where we work, and you can see here these spikes, or here these spikes. So these are noise in the GPS, of course. So I was just walking in a straight line, and at many points the GPS just show locations which are not correct. In fact, in many cases it just tells me I'm inside the building, which is totally not true. And this is especially bad in cities where the buildings are high and you have reflections from GPS. Now you have new GPS like the Galileo and dual frequencies, but still the precision is not good enough. What we do, we combine this GPS. Again, you show a trace here, and this is done in a place without tall buildings, but still I was walking on a straight line here, but there is a lot of noise there. This was just a complete straight line on the street. What we use ARKit. So we use a framework for augmented reality, which implements visual inertial odometry, which is very, very stable. So basically you can see a trace here of this distance I walked, and it's very, very smooth and very, very much on a straight line. But as you can also see, it's not aligned with the street. So it's not the the odometry, in this case the visual inertial odometry, is not correlated completely with the real world. But what we do, and you see that this is not correlated with the GPS, we basically combine the GPS for absolute positioning and the odometry for a very smooth motion. And by combining the two, we obtain a trace which is smooth and correlated with the world. I'm going to show you just a short video, for instance, of just to give you an idea of what we do when we do our correction. So we acquire GPS points that you can see they are now in red. The green line is the odometry. It has a lot of imperfections that also need correcting. You see now it's jumping. The blue line is the corrected odometry. And basically what we can then do, we can rotate and align that blue line into the red dots. You'll see it just now when that part of the video ends. You see now the blue line, which is smooth and corrected. It's well aligned with the GPS points. So what we end up doing, we end up building a proof of concept for outdoor navigation. I'm going to show you also a video of how that works. That was in Bologna in August for the AAAT conference. So basically you just type in, for instance, or you would talk in Bologna Central Station. You see the path is on the map down there, and it's also embedded in the real world as waypoints. And you can now walk, and of course, if you have headphones, you can hear those waypoints. They are not at the correct position, they are in the middle of the road. Of course, we are still working on the precise alignments. This was just a proof of concept, but the idea here was to realize and demonstrate that we could build the whole thing. So now as you turn, you see there's the full path all the way until Bologna Central Station. And then spatial audio. So basically I told you that you can hear the location of these waypoints with headphones. So how does spatial audio work? In the real world, for instance, when a phone rings somewhere in the room, you very easily know where that phone is. So what happens is the phone is ringing and the sound from the phone arrives in your left and your right ear with slightly different times. So one a bit later than the other, very, very small time difference with slightly different volumes, so volume levels. And it is also filtered by your head and by your ears. So the sound is shaped by the shape of your head, right? What we want to do with binaural audio or binaural virtual audio, we want to fake that there is something there when there is actually nothing at that location. And we want to take an audio recording of a phone ringing, for example, and we want to create at each the left and the right speaker of the headphones, we want to create the same sound that you would have heard if the phone was actually ringing in the room. So to model how your head and your ears shape those sound waves, we actually would need to measure how your head does that in real life. To measure that, you basically place microphones inside of both your ears. You go to a lab. We did this in our partners here, the Acoustics Research Institute in Vienna. So you just sit at the lab, you have a bunch of loudspeakers, and all the loudspeakers generate sound, and you measure how the sound is affected by your head. You get these really nice pictures here that represent this head-related transfer function. So these are the filters. For each direction, you have one filter for the left here and one filter for the right here. Then what you can do when you want to simulate that this loudspeaker here playing somewhere in the room or the phone, what you do, you say, for this position and for this angle relative to the head, I have my left filter and my right filter. So I filter the sound with these two filters, give them to the headphones, and then you create the illusion that that sound object is actually there. And this is what we do in the street with each of our waypoints. We basically create the illusion that there's something actually there at that corner. And now for the main part of our talk. So we are going to talk about the user studies and design. So previously, last year at the CSUN, I showed what we had done with users, and I show you also a video here because I think it's interesting just to again grasp the concept. So Valentin here is blindfolded, so you can't see anything, and then there's a virtual path in this open space. There's a phone in his head that does the visual tracking, and he can hear the sound sources. You see now he's walking towards a sound source, and when he gets there, he bumps into it, the sound will stop, and you will hear the next one. In this case, to his left, he now tries to find it, and now he found it, and he keeps walking. And with this, we could show that users can actually go about a space without seeing and still be guided with these sounds without any training. So he didn't have any training. We did this at this occasion with 50 users. We also back then had tested with blind people, the same concept, and everything went fine. And then what we wanted to do then after that, we wanted to sit with people, have focus groups and more interviews and more observations, because we wanted to go from our beta concept, the concept that I just showed you before, first into an app in which the UI is adapted for these users, and second, we wanted to offer the features and the functionality that the users actually needed. So of course, as you know, these users have very special needs, so we need to use we use the user-centered design approach to design the app with them so that the features would make sense for them. So we had first a lot of interviews and a lot of prototype testing, and then focus groups with specific structured questions, and then behavioral observations and tests on the street. So here's just to show you how we did it. That normal focus groups here shown on the left, so people were just sitting. We have structural questionnaires, and for the street we had the task of, we gave each person the task of navigating. We said, can you go to this address and show me how you do it? And then they would go independently. We had no interaction with them, or as little as possible, and we could really observe all the challenges that they had when they needed to go somewhere. We also did a similar setup as I showed you before in the video for indoors. We just fixed some route outdoor to try to understand things like, what is the spacing between points? If the spacing is too long, so between one point and the other, can you still be guided? Can you still hear the next point? Because the further the point is away, the less you can hear and the less intuitive the whole thing is. If they are too close to each other, then probably it's annoying because you're always hitting points. So we try to do that. And now for some results. So from the focus groups, one of the questions we ask is, which strategy do you use when navigating? A lot of people currently. So which strategy do you use now to do your independent mobility? A lot of people use taxis or Ubers. A lot of people just memorize the route, so they just play a navigator and or they learn the paths with mobility training or with friends. A lot of people just go on the street and ask everybody. They just move by asking. Others just try to rely a lot on points of interest, on streets and locations that they already know. People would prefer always to go longer routes that they already know, or where they know most of the route, to do shorter routes that are totally unknown. A lot of visually impaired people use the phone to take pictures and then zoom in, for instance, to see a street name or a house number. And a lot of people use turn-by-turn instructions with common navigators and use this description of surroundings with products like Blind Square, which most of the people know and have installed. These are like a small map of tools that are used for navigation. We just wanted to make an overview. Most of people use Google Maps, Apple Maps, via OptiNav, and there's another product, OSM And, which is an offline navigator tool. People can use, for instance, Be My Eyes, which is a lot of people know it too here probably, which can connect you with sighted users through a video chat where people can help you then by giving you directions or identifying, I don't know, a product in the supermarket and so on. And public transport route planners too, and Blind Square will tell you, for instance, what's around you and where. Then we asked people about general navigation issues. So what challenges would they face when navigating? Many people talked about last mile being more difficult. So a lot of people can go relatively easy or straightforward or more straightforward close to the destination, but once they're there, it would be difficult, for instance, to find the exact door they need to enter or the exact shop they need to go to. It's always difficult to know which street side do you have to go to. So from your navigator does not know if you're on the left or right side of the street. So you don't know actually if you're going to hit the correct house number. People also said that it's enough to be wrong by a few meters to already have a problem. If you're already out of your way by a few meters, sometimes it's already a big problem. Noise and crowds really increase difficulties. On the other hand, areas without any other pedestrians are also challenging because there's no one to ask to if you actually need, and there's no one to follow because people also hear where other people are going sometimes. For instance, if you need to enter a tram, you just follow other people. If there's no one there, you don't know where the door is. The first minute of navigation is also challenging because normally the location is not the location of the GPS is not so accurate. You don't have a heading yet, so you don't know exactly what you need to do. It's very typical, for instance, to just get out of the house and your GPS tells you walk straight for 500 meters, but actually you don't know if you need to go straight on this direction or straight on that direction because you just came out of the house. And a lot of people complain that they would always have to hold the phone in their hands. And finally, we ask people about to give us a wish list for navigation tools. So what would they want to see in a navigation tool? Frequent feedback to know whether they are on the right direction or where they just are out of the way. An easy way to trigger the repeating of the instructions and including to bring them back to the right route. Sometimes people don't want to be rerouted immediately as they leave a route. They just would want to come back to the right route because they already were counting on a certain route and had planned for a certain route. A link to other tools like Blind Square, and I will briefly discuss that. We really saw that on the behavior observations, how people need to use multiple tools separately. People would like to save routes for later use and places or destinations. That visual information, for in the case of visually impaired, should not overlap and have a good contrast. This is not a case in many navigators. Also possibility to send your location to another person in case you need to be helped. You need to call someone to come help you. Also to get feedback when the location accuracy decreases. This is not always the case, and it would be good to know. And also help to know when you should get off public transport. So when you are on a certain bus and there's no audible instruction on which bus stop is going to be the next, that the navigation tool would do that for you. And the key takeaways from the behavioral observations, so these were for us very, very important, because one thing is to be sitting with people and have them tell you how they feel or the things they remember at that point in time. The other thing is to be there and really see what are the challenges. And one of the biggest challenges we saw was the need to use multiple apps while navigating. So typically people had a navigator. They had also, so telling them turn by turn instructions. They had blind square, also telling them what's around. They would ask also Siri, what is the current address, and so on. So there were a combination of different apps, and even sometimes two navigation apps, because one would find a certain address better than the other, or would tell you better than the other where you were now at the point now. And the last mile was very, very hard. This we observed with most of our users. This is really one of the major issues. All of the people we were with, or all but one, could navigate until the destination, but once they were close, it was very, very hard to really go to the correct spot. And another thing, diagonal streets were an interesting challenge, because they are neither turn left, neither go straight, nor go straight. So these are a challenge for descriptions. And the main conclusions that we had with all our observations in this last big round is that most people can be guided with sound, without a big effort and without any previous training. So from all our testing, all the people, or most of the people, could do it without a problem. And one of the biggest learnings is that these users always need a combination of several applications and tools while navigating. So it was very obvious that you need to think well about all these features that people need and try to integrate them in one app in an easy way. Then we started thinking about UI, about the user interface. So all the features that we tried to collect, we did not include all of them that were on the request, but we tried to integrate a good deal of them. And then how to define the interaction with the app so that people can use it in a very simple and effortless way. We started with common sketching with pen and paper, which is very nice. And then we thought about user journeys. We thought about what would the users do from all that we learned, and we started doing wireframing, not yet thinking about guidelines for blind and visually impaired on the screen, but just about interaction and functionality. So we came up with the first prototype, and then we started with really including the guidelines in our final design, and we came up with these three views: a card view, a 2D map view, and an AR live view. I will go into each of them into more detail. So the card view is the predefined view. It is especially thought for voiceover support, and it has a minimum amount of elements on the screen so that to avoid confusion. The 2D map view is the view that users are most of the users are most used to this view, but this one is done with high contrast mode and also allowing people to have a good overview of where they are in the route and not to be distracted by a lot of map elements, which happens in other cases. And the AR live view is a superimposition of the waypoints where you need to go to, so you can see them if you want, and you can also try to hit them in a fun way, because the idea is that the app is also nice and easy to use. An important thing to say is during all these three views, the sound is always on. So the most important feedback here is the audible feedback, so that you can always know the direction of the next waypoint that you need to hit. We also did some colorblind simulation tests so that we could ensure that the color combinations that we use provide good legibility and contrast. And we don't only rely on color to convey information and concepts, we also rely we combine that with icons. The font we use a one font only with the recommended size for optimal legibility, and all the buttons are finger friendly so that the tapping is so that you can accurately tap them, and they also well spaced to avoid errors. What are the future steps now? So the next step that we do is the multimodal routing. Up until now, we only had pedestrian routing. We want to combine that now with public transport too. So walking to the bus stop, taking the bus, walking to the destination. And moreover, we want to have assistants getting on the bus and getting off the bus. So basically, want to help people find out where is the door, which is a big challenge sometimes, to know which bus is in front, because many stops have multiple buses and you need to know where a certain bus is going to, and so on. And so we now, to give you a timeline, we now finished this beta MVP that I showed previously in the design, and these new features should be implemented until the end of the third quarter of this year. And from then on, we'll start. So we now start already with beta testing. So anyone who wants to become a beta tester of the app we have already now can simply contact us and get a code to participate on our test flight testings. And hopefully by the end of next year, we have a rounded up app with a lot of feedback so we can offer something even much nicer. So thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed, and yeah, please give us feedback. Thank you.